Welcome to another edition of Arrants Outdoors. On this edition of Arrants Outdoors, well, we can't quite get into the place that gave birth to my career some 19 years ago. We can work the same area and see where the coastal plain and sandhills of South Carolina come together. The magical diversity that creates, and I can pay homage to a place that started it all for me as a naturalist. Poinsett Electronic Combat Range. The piney woods of South Carolina. I don't tend to wax nostalgic very often, but when I get back into piney woods of South Carolina, I always think about where my career started. And it started right here. Matter of fact, it started right across the road over there. Here I am in Manchester State Forest in Sumter County, South Carolina. And as you can tell, I'm in a longleaf pine dominated habitat. Now these are the cones of longleaf pine. They are very big, they are large. Longleaf pine, Pinus palustra, which means pine of the swamp. Palustra means swampy or wet, boggy area. And Pinus, of course, means pine. It's my favorite tree of all time because this is the incubating area of my career. So as you can see, the pine cones are easily distinguished when you're here in South Carolina. Longleaf, of course, refers to the long needles, but the cones are also very long, very robust, very large. And when we compare it to areas, now this tends to look like a fairly uniform longleaf pine area, but if you look behind us, there's a soil change that happens, and we see a couple other species of pine trees popping up within just a few feet of where we are. There's shortleaf pine and there's loblolly pine. As a matter of fact, right here below me are cones of each of the trees. So let's do a comparison. Longleaf, and this is loblolly. This is Pinus taeda. That means torchwood, pine with a resinous torchwood in it. So when we compare, we see loblolly pine cones are much shorter, much smaller, not nearly as big around, and true enough to the name of longleaf, the leaves, the needles of the longleaf are much, much longer than that of the loblolly pine. Now there's one other pine right back there. It is the shortleaf pine. And if you see these tiny squatty cones almost always occurring in pairs, it's not always, but very often occurring in pairs on a limb, that is a dead giveaway for shortleaf pine. That is Pinus echinata. Echinata, of course, referring to like a hedgehog. These are very spiny, short, squatty, hedgehog-like pine cones. So let's look at some of the diversity that we can find right here in the longleaf pine forest. Oh, it just smells like wonderful. Yeah, God, I love this habitat, the sand. You see these beautiful lavender pink flowers? Grass-like leaves growing up? Roseling-like flower? Well, common name for this is grass-leaved roseling, Calicia roseae. It is not a rose, however. A lot of people think this is a spiderwort because it looks like a spiderwort, and indeed it used to be in the Tradescantia genus with spiderworts. It's not a spiderwort at all. Well, what is it? It's in the daylily family. It is one of my favorite early season wildflowers here in the Sandhills coastal plain. Even makes it up into the Piedmont areas a little bit, but does extremely well in these hot, xeric, dry, sandy soils with a high percolation rate. It can rain for days in places in the Sandhills, and they don't even know what a mud puddle is in some places. But yeah, grass-leaved roseling, Calicia roseae. God, is that not exquisite? Hey, you see this beautiful pink and lavender and white flower with these beautiful compound leaves? This is goat rue. This is Tephrosia virginiana. This is a wonderful plant that, oh, I wish you could smell this. Do a scratch and sniff, see if you can smell this. This plant thrives in really dry, what we call xeric soils. And you don't get much more xeric than the sands in South Carolina. But as you can tell by the flower, it is in the pea family. It's a legume. And later on in the season, these will put bean pods out, pea pods out. Each one of these will become a flower just like this. Goat's rue, Tephrosia virginiana. Also heard it called devil's shoestring. Man, it's beautiful. Now, not every plant in the Sandhills is beautiful and touchy-feely like what we've seen so far. Let's take a look at one such plant. Ooh. Yeah. Some of you may already know what this is. In the Sandhills and coastal plain of South Carolina, this is a fairly common plant. This is poison oak. It's a toxicodendron poison plant. There are a lot of people that have a contact dermatitis reaction to this plant. I'm very fortunate. I found out whenever I started working in the piney woods 19 years ago that I was not allergic, thankfully. However, there are a lot of people that have a contact dermatitis reaction with this. And for those of you that have been following Austin Jenkins with his videos, throw up the gangster sign for me, Austin. He covered botany for your bottom. And one of the plants he talked about not using was poison ivy. Now, there's some discussion that this may indeed be the same plant. There's some evidence showing that poison oak growing next to a tree can quickly trail up it. There are some botanists that will still argue this is a separate plant, so I just call it toxicodendron, poison oak. I've seen it grow as tall as 6 feet in the Sandhills of South Carolina. This thing can get pretty big. What is that back there? Throw it up, throw it up, throw it up! Bam! Austin Jenkins, everybody. Hey, here's one of our look but don't touch plants of the Sandhills coastal plain of South Carolina. Many of you who live in that area know this immediately. This is stinging nettle. My favorite common names for it is tread lightly or tread softly. This is Nidoscolus stimulosus. And it will stimulate you if you bother it. Let's take a close look. You see on the stem and the leaves those hair-like projections. Those projections will inject you with a tiny bit of formic acid should you bother this plant. That is a wonderful deterrent against grazing by animals like white-tailed deer. By the way, formic acid is also the compound found in stinging ants, like fire ants. So it will stimulate you, sure enough. And for those of you that have never had the pleasure of being stung by this stinging nettle, or tread softly, tread lightly, it will make you itch and burn for quite some time, for several hours. So when you see it in the Sandhills coastal plain of the Carolinas, down into Georgia, Florida, I do advise you to tread softly. We're going to have to do a very close look at this tiny plant, Stipulicidae cetaceae. It's called Pineland grassy pink. I've heard it called wild wireflower before, and pine wireflower. Hey, listen, there's a brown-headed nuthatch. This is a tiny, tiny flower that only blooms for a very short period of time, has this very wiry, scaly look to it, does incredibly well in these same dry, xeric, sandy soils that we've been talking so much about today. But that is the flower. It is absolutely tiny and not at all delicate. This is a tough flower, as you have to be growing in such a hot and oftentimes very dry habitat. Certainly when fire comes through. So this again is a beautiful Pineland wire pink, grassy pink it's called. So again, just the tiniest flower. Wow. Wait a second. I think I see something. I do. That's Alpha Josh. Bam! Ho, baby, do it now. Ho! We the Dixie Chicks of the naturalist world, y'all.